Well, you can't trust County.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me, Coachella?
Can you hear me? Oh my God. Can we just give the creepers like a little tiny bit of like how you felt, how it was experiencing?
It was amazing.
Oh my
it was
God.
Amazing. Like it was genuinely, I'm definitely going next year.
Yeah.
It was such a fun festival. Saw so many people. Saw Charlie, like not even just your set, just walking around.
Really?
Of course, yeah, because all these celebs are walking around.
Yeah. I would have literally passed out. But like truly celebs, whatever, Charlie XCX, I'm dead on the ground. Like she's like my Lady Gaga, I feel like.
It's a lot of creators and it's a lot of people walking around, but it's just like a big adult playground. I participated in some adult activities involving substances.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Very fun stuff.
So fun. Oh my God. Well, it looked like you had a blast. Unfortunately, I feel like I came back from tour and just got hit by pollen. That's been my substance that I've been dealing with.
Right. You're the allergy queen.
Right. Yes.
Mama Zyrtec.
On Zyrtec, I'm like, if I can make it through this without having an attack, I'll be shocked, baby.
I will let you run.
But I decided that I wanted to bring a paranormal case to you today and the creepers because it's been a hot minute since I've done one, baby. And I know that I tend to stick to more of the true crime and like the unsolved mysteries, but I wanted to switch it up. And I think I also promised one of the creepers during our Seattle show that I was actually cooking up a paranormal case. So I wanted
Did you?
I did. And I wanted to keep that promise. And I don't know if you remember this, but I told them that it was based out of your home state, which is why I wanted to bring it specifically to you. Do you remember that?
I vaguely do, actually. I think I remember somebody like cornering you and being like, during the Q&A, and they were like, where are the paranormal cases? And you're like, I've got one cooking. And I'm like, and she in fact did not have one cooking.
And she did not have one cooking. But I did, baby. I just had to come back to it real quick because it takes place in your home state. And I would be shocked if you hadn't heard of this case before because there's a pretty famous little movie about it, which was aptly titled A Haunting in Connecticut. Really pushing the boundaries of creativity with that title. But have you seen that movie? Do you know it? Okay.
Of course. Yeah. I know the story.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, this will be...
Somewhat, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sure there are small details in there. It's been a while since I saw the movie because I think the movie came out in like 2013. It's either 2008 or 2013.
I think it's 2009.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I think I saw like bits and pieces of it at like a sleepover one time, but I've never seen it all the way through. But I obviously it came across my desk while I was like researching this case. And I think a lot of it is like loosely based on this true story I'm about to tell. But like all the names were changed for the movie and everything, but it's definitely based on this story, which is centering around the Snedeker family who moved into a supposedly very haunted house in the late 80s in Southington, Connecticut. Do you know Southington at all? Like that area?
I do know of it. I have not been to it or spent a lot of time there, if I've been.
Okay. Well, I think it's pretty close to where you grew up. I think it's like maybe 30-ish minutes away. So it's not like, from what you've described Connecticut to be to me, I don't think it's in like the super, super hoity-toity area of Connecticut, but it definitely took place in like a very nice, beautiful home that they were not expecting to have sort of this like sinister underbelly inside of it. So I wanted to bring it to you. But before I launch into the story of the Snedekers and the paranormal experiences that took place in their house, let me just say, welcome back, creepers, to another Friday episode of CreepTime, the podcast. Yes. We are so excited that you're back with us, babies. I hope you're hanging in there if you're dealing with any sort of springtime allergies like I am, taking your Zyrtec, your
or if you came back from Coachella and
or
your throat was prolapsed. Yeah. Either or.
Yeah, I hope there were some I bet there were some creepers at Coachella.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's
but
huge. So
I know. Are you going back for the second weekend?
Oh my God, no.
No, okay.
People who do that are crazy. No. It's hard. It's hard on the body.
I was going to need a stun gun. Like I would need to be like catapulted to make it to the second weekend. So I'm glad
the vitamin B shots were in abundance. Yeah. They had tents.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad you'll get to like relax a little bit. And My name is Stu, if you are new here. And then alongside of me, I had to laugh because I had tapped ChatGPT for like an alliterative description of you. And she hit me with the scandalously delicious Celestine.
Scandalously delicious.
Scandalously delicious. I was like, we'll take it. Um, you're like, I will not.
Why is it a scandal that I'm delicious?
I don't know, baby, but I did kind of love it. But each Friday, we bring you new episodes of all things true crime with a little bit of like levity and humor. So we're so happy that you're here if you did find us. And we drop video episodes on Spotify and YouTube, as well as just regular audio eps on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. But if you do like us, feel free to leave us a review or comment. Specifically, if you're commenting on Spotify these days, we can interact with you, which is super fun for us. And if you do like us, tell your friends and your coworkers and your family, your freaking allergist, pharmacist. I don't care, baby. Tell them about us because word of mouth.
Tell your wax specialist.
Yes. Thank you.
Tell the gynecologist.
Please,
keep
God,
going. Like
your spray tan
tell
artist.
all your people.
Yeah. But we're so happy that you're here with us this Friday. And with all that being said, baby, are you ready to learn more about the infamous haunting in Connecticut?
I am actually, because I'm not entirely sure of when it took place. I'm 99% sure it was in the 20th century, right? Like the 1920s. It was. Okay.
Yeah, it was in the 1980s. So
it was?
Yeah, it's not super far. It's not a super long time ago.
I'm like, maybe I don't know the story.
Yeah, well,
or maybe I'm just basing it all off of the movie.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of like, we'll get into it, but like the backstory of the house took place like a long time ago. So maybe that's like what you're thinking of, like in the 20s or the 30s.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's like the ghosts from the past are coming to haunt the family that moved into the 80s, a little like Amityville.
Yes, very Amityville in more ways than one. So let me just give you a little bit of a background on the Snedeker family and why they moved into the home at 208 Meridian Avenue in the first place. So the Snedeker family unit was made up of Alan and Carmen Snedeker. They called him Al. That was the mom and the dad. And their 4 children, Philip, who was 13, Bradley, who was 11, and then Alan Jr. and Jennifer, who were both younger. I couldn't find their exact ages, but I think they were both under 10 years old when the family moves in. And the setup is very eerily similar to Amityville to me, mostly because the father was sort of going through some like personality shifts at the time. He was having some trouble. He was apparently a mason worker and unfortunately had a bit of a past with alcoholism, which would only be exacerbated during the time when everything sort of goes down in the house. Carmen, the wife, was a waitress, and I think in between jobs when all the stuff starts happening. So there was already a little bit of tension financially in the family, but most importantly, there was serious family tension and heartache because their son Philip had just been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is basically a cancer of your lymph nodes. And I think in the movie, he's sick as well, right? The son?
It's hard to remember. The bits and pieces of the movie that I do remember actually take place a long time ago, so it must be the backstory I'm remembering.
Yeah.
God, my voice is so shot.
The backstory I'm remembering.
I'm like, it must be the backstory I'm remembering.
I'm gonna tap you when I need things to be read in a demonic voice when that comes into play later on.
100%. I could have done the voiceover for Linda Blair and The Exorcist.
Baby.
Your mother's in here with us, please.
But I think in the movie, even though it's loosely based off of the story, I think the son was shown to be very ill, like very like dark circles under his eyes. And at the time of his diagnosis, the Snedekers had been living in upstate New York and traveling back and forth to the University of Connecticut Hospital for the best treatments they could get for him, which was, of course, very expensive. And not only was it tough, medical bill wise, and travel, but it was really tough on Philip health wise. He had a lot of fatigue. And as a result of his disease, the traveling back and forth became really tough for him. This and the financial strain forced the Snedekers to start looking for a better option, a place they could live temporarily, somewhere near UConn Hospital. And I know I just touched on the fatigue component, but just so you get an idea of what Philip was really going through, imagine what it's like when you feel really sick and your lymph nodes are swollen. So it's not only obviously that is happening for him, but it's like major swelling in his neck and then everywhere else. So you have lymph nodes. So like your armpits, your groin, like even in your chest, lots of like shortness of breath. Your bones are really sore. It's very painful apparently to be touched. So he's basically this like little 13-year-old kid that's in and out of like dull and sharp pain constantly. It's like all your healthy cells in your body just basically like go rogue and start changing and attacking you. So he was going through.
It would make sense that they would move down.
Yeah, he was going through a lot. So when the family found this home in Southington, Connecticut, which was a duplex inside of this really beautiful old colonial home, they were stoked. And I think I have a picture of it on that first page of the Reddit link, which, the Canva link, which we'll drop into Reddit so y'all can see sort of like a visual.
Your brain looks like one step ahead.
But yeah, you could see it's a beautiful, like old historic house.
Huge from what I can tell from the outside.
Yeah.
It's really big.
It's huge. But it was a duplex. I thought that was interesting. That was something I didn't know based off the movie, that they were sharing it with another family, even though it was like sectioned off. But when they found this house, they pretty much signed on the dotted line in June of 1986 because it was very affordable for them to rent. And they initially moved in with their son, of course, Philip, and then their other 3 kids, Bradley, Alan Jr., and Jennifer. And then they eventually ended up moving in some of their nieces on Carmen's side of the family into the home, but that was a little bit later on. But just to give you some context, at the height of all the drama that goes into this house, we're dealing with a very full house. We had a lot of people packed into one space. But like you said, this was a very big home. For a duplex, it was especially big. It had 5 bedrooms. There was an upper and a lower level. And then, of course, the star of the story. And I'm going to need creepers on the other end to say, give me that basement. The basement was really where everything spooky transpired. So
that is kind of like Amityville now that I'm...
It's very Amityville. And we'll get to like when it really becomes Amityville later on in the story. But yeah, very, very spooky. And when they did kind of sign on the dotted line, it was very rushed. They apparently had not given the house a full inspection really, or maybe done their due diligence. Had they...
Well, I mean, they're renting, so...
Right. So it shouldn't be like...
Hopefully it should be. I mean, it's temporary in my mind, where they're like, let's just sign. The most important thing is that we have a place that's close for him. So
totally.
It totally makes sense to me that they would rush into something if it's cheap.
Well, I think after you learn what might have been blocked off, you might have been like, that's a different story, baby. But I'll be curious to get your thoughts. So,
I don't know. I think somebody died in this bungalow. And I signed right away.
You're like, oh, you do think somebody died in there?
I'm pretty sure. And you know what, Jen? Hi, Jen, if you're listening.
Hi,
she
Jen.
gave me a website where you can you pay like a one-time fee. I think it's called like whodiedhere.com or something. You pay like a one-time fee of like $11 and you type in your address and they will give you a death record if anyone has died in the home you're in. I for sure know my family home back in Connecticut. I know at least 3 different people have died at that house. But people die in homes all the time.
It's true. It's true. I don't even want to know how many people have died in my building.
Oh, in an apartment building? Forget it.
Yeah. Well,
Casualty,
and this
left and right,
apartment
left and
building
right.
is, I'm one of the youngest people that lives in here. So I know, I know that there's
building is from how many hundreds of years ago?
This
Or
building, I
100 years
think,
ago?
it's about 100 years old. I think it was a hotel in the 20s. Tower of Terror vibes. Death, baby.
Prostitution, drugs, alcohol.
Oh, yeah. You name it. What's the name of that website again? whodiedhere.com.
It's something like that. I got to check. Jem will give it to me again. But like I didn't want to pay the fee, but I am fairly certain somebody died here.
Oh, I need to know. I need to know the lore. And
we'll do a deep dive on a premium episode.
We shall. So let me get back to the basement. So Carmen, the mom, give me that basement. She said that she had never seen the basement because it was blocked off when she had toured the home. So once they moved in and they started unloading and unpacking and were able to get access to it, they were pretty shook at what they saw, though initially it wasn't super clear when they walked down there. So the dad, Al, reportedly was the first one to really explore. And at first he just noticed some strange tools, but it's going to get to be a lot more than just some strange tools upon further inspection. So if you don't know this part of the story, this was formerly a funeral home.
Oh, it was.
It was. So
Oh,
if
I should have
you
clocked into that when you said there was something in the basement because that's where they would prep bodies.
So if you look at that picture on the first page, I put an arrow, but that's actually the door where they would bring in the bodies. If you can see, I think I put an arrow there.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah, so this was formerly the Hallahan Funeral Home, which operated from 1920 until roughly sometime throughout the late 1950s or early 60s. So it was around for a couple of decades operationally, and reportedly the family had no idea that the home had been a former mortuary, even though the landlord who rented it to them said he had disclosed that information before leasing it to the Snedekers. I also read that the mom claimed the doors to the basement were blocked off for renovations when she toured a second time. So in hindsight now, I think she probably knows why. Anyways, in this basement were all sort of freaky contraptions and items. There were, in no particular order of creepiness, there were embalming tables, there was a coffin lift and a blood drain. There were also supposedly crucifixes that were mounted into the walls above each door. Just very creepy. I think I put a picture also of the blood drain, like Carmen looking at it, or maybe it was the coffin lift. And yeah,
I mean, if it was operational as like a full mortuary, I mean, those are all the things I kind of would expect. It's just crazy that you could move into a place and that wouldn't be disclosed. But I don't even know if I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like the idea of like like an old school funeral home where like somebody lived in the house, the basement was the morgue or the prep station, and like the living room area would be the viewing parlor. I don't know if I would assume that that's haunted necessarily unless something bad was going down
had
in that
happened.
funeral home.
Right. Well, it's funny because one of the people that comes in later on in the story, who's like sort of like inspecting and like researching and trying to determine if there's actual like paranormal activity in this house, they kind of said the same thing. They were like, I mean, it's a funeral home, so technically everybody that was in there was already dead.
Right.
It's
I'm like,
actually
what's
a
the
lot less
unfinished
creepy
business?
than you think. Yeah. It would be more so, like you said, if somebody in there was like doing something with the bodies or they died while they were in there. I actually don't think I've ever been to a funeral home for any particular reason. Have you?
Well, you've been to a funeral.
I have.
That's a funeral home, isn't it? You mean like an old school, like a house that was used for
I've only
funerals?
ever been to a funeral in a church. I've never actually like been to a funeral home, like
This
where
might be
they've
a
done it
religious
in the.
thing because I grew up Catholic, but usually you go to the funeral home where it's the same place where they would prepare a body,
Mhm.
and they'll have the viewing there, which is the
Yeah.
wake. And then they'll have usually a church ceremony where pallbearers will take the casket into the hearse, bring to the church. The casket is brought into the church. There's
Mhm.
a mass, and then the casket is reloaded down the steps of the church into the hearse and brought to the cemetery for the burial. It's a full day affair.
That's so yeah, maybe it is because what do they always say? I was raised Episcopalian, which I think is like diet Catholicism. It's like half of the work. I think I've only ever gone to the funeral, the portion where it's just the pallbearers bring the casket into and we have the service and then exit it out. I've never actually been inside of a real funeral home. Obviously, I know what they're like, but maybe if I do go in, I'll have more of a feeling or a vibe on like how, like to me, yeah, it wouldn't feel all that creepy. It would just feel sad.
Yeah, it's melancholy going in. You know
Yes.
what's strange is I went to a funeral and it wasn't the one that was in my hometown, but I went to a funeral for a larger funeral home where they are running multiple wakes at the same time. So there are multiple different grieving families all in the same building and different viewings happening in different rooms, which was
Oh.
very interesting to like walk past a room and see an open casket for someone you don't know.
Oh, that's so
So
strange.
I guess I never thought it could be anything other than that, but that's my own like insulated Catholicism. Damn.
No, well, thank you for sharing that. I also have never seen an open casket, which I think that actually really,
Really?
yeah, I think
Oh,
that would
wow.
upset me a lot. But that might actually feel more creepy than being inside the actual. But I know it's very comforting for a lot of people. So
Well, a lot of people think it's useful for closure to like
yeah,
actually see the person and have that moment to process that they're
Mhm.
gone. But I have only ever been to open caskets
Well,
for every funeral I've been to.
I think it's going to be interesting when we kind of unpack like the layout of the actual basement, because I mean this was a pretty like involved. I mean it was a pretty big funeral home. Maybe they had like multiple viewing rooms too, but I guess when they discovered all of this, the family tried not to think too much of it initially. I mean, Al in particular really wanted to keep it on the down low and told
Mhm.
Carmen, like, let's not make a big deal out of this. Also, they had to make it work to have all of them live in there. They really didn't have a choice but to have some of the kids actually like inhabit the basement, sleep down in the basement.
They did?
Yes. So to make it work,
Oh, okay.
to make it all work, Al decided he was like, well, we could throw, all the kids in like one of the bedrooms upstairs, but it's going to be much more comfortable if Philip and Bradley, who are the two younger sons, take over the basement. It's just going to have more space.
Mhm.
So little did they know this, but afterwards, when they were able to get like blueprints of the home, when it was the funeral home, Philip and Bradley their bedrooms were the original north and south coffin room locations.
Oh.
Creepy. Now, it reportedly didn't take too long for the mom, Carmen, to start noticing weird things happening around the house. At first, she just thought that she was like losing a lot of things, just misplacing them because maybe she was scatterbrained. She's like in a new space. But she said that things started going missing around the house. And then she had this incident that was sort of the inciting one. And I do know that they reenacted this in the movie. I just remember it specifically but it did take place in real life, according to Carmen, where she was mopping the floors when they first moved in. And as she was mopping, the water started to turn like blood red on the ground. And the thing that sort of gave this credibility was that there was a cleaning crew that was there at the time when they were first moving in, kind of getting some of the stuff out. And she asked one of the crew members, like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And they said, yes. And she just sort of like put it out of her mind after that. She thought that maybe it was like the wood stain was coming up or something was weird. But that was sort of one of her first just weird things that happened to her in the house. But then her son, Philip, started undergoing some pretty major personality changes, which at first the parents thought had to do with some of the treatment that he was undergoing and the medications that he was on. Those might explain his irritability, but then it quickly devolved into these visions and weird figures that were showing up to visit Philip, according to Philip. He kept a journal where he would write things down about what he was seeing. He wrote weird, almost like poem-like sentences, one of which that I read was, ice blue skins make me turn red. And he kept repeatedly writing down the phrase, fiddle with the dead, just like fiddle with the dead.
Oh,
Super spooky. I know, super, super spooky stuff. And he was trying to like relay this to his brother and like these visions of like figures that he was seeing. And his brother was very skeptical at first. He was kind of changed his tune later on. But Philip had also started to get very physical at this point, just like lashing out, getting very violent with his siblings. I did see that he was going to a therapist to kind of help with the mental agony he was going through.
His illness, yeah.
Yes, but nothing was really working. And he also started sharing with his siblings that he was seeing apparitions specifically of a man in a tall gray hat and these shadowy figures that were playing games with him. And he did as a little kid, like make these sketches that were very spooky. I should have included one on there, but
I was just going to ask. I was like,
I know. I'll send them to you. Like super like gaunt faced looking men with like these tall hats, very, very weird and like kind of specific for a little kid to be making up. I guess he's 13, but very weird stuff. And
it's almost reminded me. Did you ever watch Hill House, Haunting on Hill House?
No, I didn't.
It's reminding me of some of the imagery in there. So I'm wondering if they plucked some of it from this story.
Well, I almost thought that maybe Insidious plucked some of the imagery from the story.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of stories, I guess, that are kind of similar to it. So maybe they all just kind of like steal from the original source, but it sounds like this is the OG source.
Yeah. And they all kind of go back to that weird like 1920s, 30s, like Victrola music playing vibe. I mean, that was definitely what they felt like they were seeing in this house. Not only Philip, but later on the parents. But he claimed that he was hearing these voices, music that was coming from the basement. And then Philip's brother ended up claiming that even he started seeing the figure of a little boy. Specifically, he saw this figure of a boy come like walking out of the wall, and then it started flying around his room.
Ooh.
Very, very creepy.
I'm like, that can't be a statement in passing. That's kind of crazy.
I know. I'm like, the only reason I'm saying this stuff like one after the other is because there's so much that they all start seeing. And I'm like, if I like to try to pack all this into an hour episode is like, this went on for like 2 years, the things that they were seeing, and they get like wackier and wilder. So the Snedekers, and specifically Carmen, I will mention, were very devout Catholics. So she was not willing to believe that what her children were seeing was real.
I was just going to ask, like, how much resistance was there from the parents?
At first, a hell of a lot. And then things kind of took a turn. And I want us to unpack that because I think there's a lot more to that than just like all of a sudden they started seeing things. I think there was a lot of mental anguish.
You got me kicking my feet up. I'm spooked. I'm like getting my feet up off the ground.
Get your feet up. I know. I wish it was like chilly. This feels like something I should tell at like Halloween
chilly.
Time.
It's overcast in LA. Oh my God.
Get spooked, baby. Get spooked.
My liver's like recovering. Like, shaky.
This is your spookchella. But what really changed for Carmen was when she started finding personal objects around the house. This is apparently what really changed her mind about the whole thing. She started finding old photos of what she thought were maybe the family that had lived there previously, or maybe like the funeral home owners. That freaked her out. But then she apparently found toe tags from like old bodies. Toe tags. And I think,
got full body chills.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
It's happening.
It's happening.
I'm tearing up.
Good. Tear up. That's the goal.
Ooh, I just got spooked.
Is that not so freaking creepy? Finding toe tags
would absolutely make me leave a city.
Yeah. I'm vomiting at that point. That's enough for me. I'm out. I think we'd be foolish also not to call out that sometimes, though, maybe oftentimes, when you are in a heightened state of stress, you're going to tend to look at things differently. You're going to be, maybe experiencing these feelings of like, just, it could be grief, but in this case, I think it was just like really intense stress dealing with what Philip was going through. So what could have been happening here, I just want to call it out, even though we're getting spooked. I do just want to mention that it might have felt better for the Snedekers in some way to just kind of like project those feelings onto the possibility of a haunting or claim that there was like a demonic presence rather than face the stark reality of like, oh my God, my son may or may not make it. That's just my feeling though. So I just wanted to pause there and see what you think, because I do feel like there is a lot of credibility though that the parents were like, we are not messing with this. And then all of a sudden it really did kind of take a sharp turn. And Philip was already going through it at that point.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I'd be curious to hear for any folks who are therapists or psychologists who what their POV is on that, about a family that's going through a collective grief together, like how they sort of manifest a distraction together, and if it's in the camp of like, I don't know, mass hallucination or delusion in some way. So it's tough to say how much of it was fact and how much was fiction.
Yeah. There's another moment in this story where I kind of feel like I'm on my back foot again. Like when I examine how much of it was really like hallucination and just everybody being together. There's another moment that happens like once the nieces get there. And I mean, you know me, I feel like I tend to be more of like the skeptic sometimes. And even I was like, wait, but what? Like that's how could they explain that away almost?
Well, there are some things about it that are factual. It was factually formerly a funeral
home. Yeah.
So that is the baseline. That's the groundwork that we're coming up from. And then the specificity of some of the things that were found also perked my ears up, but it's also the believability of people who were skeptics and were religious and didn't want to play into any of this or believe any of this was happening while they were going through something horrible.
Yeah.
Until it was too face front.
Now, this was sort of a misstep in my opinion, but apparently Al, the dad, was so pissed off from all of the shenanigans and the heightened emotional state of not only his kids, but now his wife and the electricity bill. Apparently, everybody in the house was sleeping with their lights on, that he physically went and removed all of the light bulbs in the house, or at least from the basement at first, one by one, so that the kids couldn't keep the lights on.
Oh my God.
And then there was this incident one night where Philip heard his sister come down the stairs and she started flicking the light switch on and off to basically taunt him. And when he yelled at her to stop, she wouldn't. So he decided he was going to chase her up the stairs. He heard her laughing. He saw her very clearly running up. But once he reached the top of the stairs, he found that his sister was not only there, but then he walked to her room and she was sound asleep in her bed. And apparently the parents came.
She wasn't there.
Oh, she wasn't there.
Oh.
And and then if you remember, I said that they had taken all the lights out of the basement. And so the dad, Al, comes out and he's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, get back in bed. And he's like, Philip says, no, like, Jennifer, I swear she was just downstairs. She was playing with the lights, like making it so I couldn't sleep. And he was like, stop it with the antics. Like, there aren't even any lights down there anymore. I took them out today. So just like super creepy. Like, how could that have been possible? Mm-hmm. Now, Philip's mental condition had only grown worse, and he started to experience even more really, really intense episodes. I was also reading that Philip had previously had a very sweet demeanor. He wasn't an angry kid, so the switch was very noticeable. He also started choosing to spend, this part really freaks me out. I don't know why, but it just like makes me sick to my stomach. He started choosing to spend most of his time in the basement. He said that he liked the way that he felt down there. And as things grew more and more horrific, Carmen claimed that some of the crucifixes that she said were like nailed into the doorways, above the doorways, she said they started coming off of the walls. And that's when more activity started to move out of the basement and the morgue area. And she said it started to move into the rest of the house. She also claimed that at this point, she started to hear music that was coming from the basement. It was no longer just the kids. Now, the dad at this time was starting to let his issues with alcohol get the best of him. And he was not only over the stories, he was also over Philip's antics, claiming that he was the one that was really stoking the fires with the siblings and the nieces who were now at this point staying with them. So I should mention that they have a very full house at this point. Carmen's sister, who I think lived in Alabama at the time, was experiencing some sort of like health issues and I think was getting a divorce from her husband. Mm-hmm. But anyway, she decides to move.
I say as if I know. I'm like,
of course.
Divorce.
Of course. So she decides to ask if her daughters, the nieces, can come and stay with Carmen and Al for a little bit, kind of while she gets her footing. And they were 17 and 12 years old. I saw that their names were Kelly and Mary. And then I saw somewhere else that Kelly's name was really Tammy. So it was either Kelly and Mary or Tammy and Mary. But they reluctantly sort of agreed to take them in under their wing. And unfortunately, nothing would really tip the scale more for Carmen in terms of believing something evil was in the house until an incident happened to her niece, Kelly, or Kelly Tammy, whichever of the names she went by. So she recounted this really disturbing story to Carmen about waking up with feeling handprints or feeling hands under her shirt and under, like on her chest as she was sleeping shortly after they moved in. She said that her 12-year-old sister had also told her that she was feeling this while they were sleeping.
Oh,
very strange. And this is where things get really awful. And I will just kind of issue a little bit of like a trigger warning here. It gets there's some sexual assault and with minors and stuff. It's pretty awful. But turns out that Kelly went to Carmen several days later. And she basically says, I didn't want to say this at the time, but it was actually Philip that I think was putting his hands up my shirt. And I'm pretty confident that he was doing this to Mary as well. Though I will just point out that this information came out years later because from everything I saw, the nieces maintained for a long time that this was like some demonic entity that had been assaulting them. Mm-hmm. I will get to more about that in a little bit, but the Snedekers went on like a couple of talk shows. They did some press later on in the 80s and the early 90s, at like the height of all the publicity around this case. And the nieces in those like
I was just
packages.
gonna ask, when did all this story like break? Because we're like years into like all of these different like experiences. So how
Yeah.
did anybody on the outside learn about this?
Well, just a little known investigative group called Ed and Lorraine Warren, which we'll get to in a little bit. But they were the ones that really, once they entered the fold, this blew up in the press.
Mhm.
But
As it so often tends to do
as
with
it so
them.
often does. But they moved in 1986, and it wasn't really until 1988 that everything kind of came out about what they had been experiencing. But I think at around this time, we're still maybe like our first year in. 'Cause
Okay.
I'll get into it, but Philip does eventually leave the home. But things continue after that. So
And how old was Philip at the time, did you say?
Philip was 13 when they first moved in, and then he was 15
At
by
this
the
point.
time the family like moved out.
Mhm.
So also like important to note though his age, because it's also like a very formative age. You're going through a lot at that age, and then he's battling cancer. I mean, he was going through it. But yeah, so like I was saying, like they maintained that it was like a demonic entity when they kind of went on talk shows and whatever, but they thought at the time they had been assaulted by
That
their
might have
cousin.
been Philip, yeah.
Yeah. So now that we know about like how that all kind of actually shook out, Carmen was confronted by her nieces about it, supposedly at the time. And as a mom, she was, of course, devastated by this. Like I said, Philip's personality had changed drastically, but I don't think his mom ever thought it would go that far. So Carmen reportedly did confront Philip, and she questioned him about the whole ordeal. And he supposedly was in total denial of it at the time.
Mhm.
He claimed that his cousins were making it up. But thankfully, I will give kudos to Carmen here because I think this takes a lot of strength to do. She did the right thing, which was that, like, whether it's true or not that he did this, something is dreadfully wrong here with my son, and I need to get him some serious help. Like, the train is off the tracks at this point. So she decided to have him psychiatrically evaluated, and Philip was determined to have early onset schizophrenia, which
Really?
which it can be used to kind of explain some of the, voices he was hearing, the demons he was seeing. So if you lean more in the direction of, the medicine and science rather than the paranormal, you might see that as a pretty easy explanation as to why he had been seeing or feeling these things. And
Not that you can't believe both.
not that you can't believe that. I was going to say, I kind of fall in that camp. And this is a very interesting case because I think even if you do fall in more of like the medical side or you lean that way, there's
You think
a
there's a
lot.
logical medical explanation for Philip's behavior versus seeing paranormal presence around him.
Yeah, but there's still, I think there's a lot to this case that you can't just explain away, or there isn't just like a scientific explanation for it. But after this evaluation, Philip ends up being housed at a psychiatric facility. So he's now moved out of the home. Yes.
I
And
didn't see that coming. Wow.
I know. Doctors actually decided to observe him for a few weeks before developing a more serious medical plan for him. It was revealed later on that Philip was also apparently questioned by a police officer about the assault. And he apparently did confess to sneaking into his cousin's room in the middle of the night. Yes. I didn't see in that report if it said that he confessed to specifically touching them, but he did say, like, yes, I would go into their room at night and like, yes, and
there's just one
watch
sentence
them.
left out of there to like put two and two together.
I know. So I can't imagine how upsetting all this was for the entire family. But now with Philip out of the home, I think Carmen and Al had hoped that everything would sort of get back to normal. Everyone could return to some stable ground. Now, like I was kind of saying, here's where the skeptic in me dies off a little, and I lean harder into the paranormal aspect of all of this because things started to get worse around the house after Philip was taken away. And I think this is going to be really interesting for us to unpack from an emotional perspective. I don't know if it's because the cousins had now been severely traumatized, but the two cousins' interactions with the paranormal started growing worse and worse. And I think they even started to question if it was really Philip or if it was like a demonic entity that had been making him do what he did. Because apparently, shortly after he was out of the house, Kelly in particular started hearing a lot of noises and voices. And she was feeling this like sensation specifically in her legs where it felt like she was starting to get pulled from her bed at night. And one of the most chilling encounters I heard her retell was one where she was so scared out of her mind that she like took a rosary from the side of the on her bedside table, and she remembered where she put it in her hands and she started to pray, and then the rosary was just like ripped out of her hands. I mean, this is her recounting, but I found it pretty compelling. And then things got really weird. The dad, Al, who had been super like, I don't mess around with this stuff, he claims this gets really strange that he felt like he had been sexually assaulted by something in the middle of the night. And then Carmen said the same thing. Carmen,
this is quite interesting. I'm
super
building
weird.
when it comes to like the idea of a funeral home, and I'm curious to see if we'll get into the history of this when it comes to the idea of a funeral home being haunted. I'm wondering, I'm like, what sort of, I don't know, like shady or dark, twisted things could have happened there. And I was envisioning necrophilia could have been something happening in the funeral home if everybody who is in there later on is experiencing what feels like sexual assault, albeit I believe the girls were maybe assaulted by Philip. The father is very interesting, unless this is a shared delusional experience they're all having.
And well, it's so weird you say that because there is some history I'm going to get into about the funeral home. And when I first read it, I was like, oh, necrophilia. That makes sense. It wasn't necrophilia.
It wasn't?
Necromancy, which...
Wait, which is what's the difference?
So necromancy is apparently the like practice of conjuring spirits. Like you're trying to get in touch with like evil, trying to talk to them. And then necrophilia is, of course, like sexually messing around with dead bodies. But I thought the exact same thing, by the way. I was like, that would make total sense. And so I was kind of shocked that wasn't part of it.
Why do they call it necromancy? That's so, well, I guess because it's dead, but.
Yeah, I guess necro must mean dead. And then Mancy, I'm like, what is the etymology? Etymology 101. But yeah, so Al had started feeling like he was being sexually assaulted. Carmen also felt like that she had at that point become like the main target for that dark energy that was in the house. She said, and I have a picture of it in there, like she would have these episodes where she would almost feel like she was like possessed and she would pass out and then kind of like come to afterwards. They like took one Polaroid of her basically where she, I guess, had just passed out on the floor and they were like documenting it. But she'd like awaken from her stupor. And yeah, I think at this point, Carmen just, they wanted to get off the ride. And she was going to either, you know, if you believe that she really didn't have any like financial gain or like intent to really drum up some paranormal narrative here, then I think you could see it going one way, but she's going to take the story a little bit further. So if you lean in the direction that she was doing this for financial gain, you might see it a different way. And we'll unpack all of that. But I just want to like pause here and get your feelings on the Snedekers thus far. Like, do you feel like they're justified in everything that they're sort of saying right now? Or like you feeling a certain way about, you know,
I don't know
if they are pumping this up for financial gain eventually?
It's difficult to say. It really is, actually, because getting Ed and Lorraine Warren involved, I'm always curious about how that conversation and meeting started. Like, where did word first travel? I guess in the similar sense of like the Conjuring story, like how did people notify Ed and Lorraine Warren? Was it this family who reached out to them? Did the Warrens catch wind of it from like a police report and then they came to them? So when it comes to, I guess, sort of making a decision about whether or not they were really experiencing something or this was for publicity or it was a distraction or maybe even a collective delusion because they were under a heightened state of stress, I am very curious about their relationship to the Warrens and how that started.
Can I ask what your thoughts are on Ed and Lorraine, just like prior to us even talking about them in this case? Like, do you have an opinion on them?
Um, I'm kind of neutral to them, to be honest, because I don't know entirely what it was they did for like their work. I know it was involved in investigating paranormal occurrences and also sort of doing exorcisms or blessing houses, but I'm more so interested in the families who are experiencing the haunt, their
Mhm.
relationship to seeking the Warrens, because that informs for me whether or not I think the haunt was real.
Okay. I'm only just curious because, like, after doing this research, and understandably
Also, this
so.
one bang that keeps rolling down, I look like him from Powerpuff Girls.
I thought you were talking about me because
No,
on
no,
my
no.
curtain bang, this one just comes right here.
Oh, girls.
Him. I forgot about him. Oh my
Maybe I
God.
think about him daily. Daily.
Daily. But yeah, the internet is so divided on Ed and Lorraine Warren. I mean, people
Oh, yeah.
go so nuts over, especially their involvement, in this case, which we'll get into. But yeah, I was curious because I couldn't quite remember if I feel like it's Zach Bagans. We had like seen something maybe from the Conjuring house or something but I don't think we really talked about the Warrens all that much. But
Well,
they
Ed
had
and
I
Lorraine
think
Warren
maybe donated it
definitely
or something.
did make money off of what they were doing.
Oh, for sure.
So that is the difference. And my curiosity about this family is whether or not they made money from what happened here. Did they sell rights to the story?
Mhm.
Were they getting appearance fees for going on
Mhm.
television? Like, did they write books? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, we're going to get into it because we're going to talk about how Carmen kind of pivots here and either tries to get them out of it or, if you lean in the other direction, tries to make some money off of this whole incident. So her first instinct was to get the church involved and have them bless the home because at this point, moving was not an option for them financially. She had also claimed that the demon had latched itself to her and the family. So if they did leave, she believed that it was just going to follow them wherever they went. Now, I saw a couple of conflicting reports that there was, in fact, a Catholic priest that was brought in and he did do a blessing on the home. This is before the Warrens get there. But then I also read that that was like made up later on, that the church would have never sent out a priest to the home and done that sort of a blessing because it wouldn't want to be related to paranormal claims at that point. But whether it did or it didn't happen, one thing we do know is that a pair of paranormal experts gets involved with the case. So as the story goes, Carmen's friend had left a local magazine at her house about a week after that initial blessing that supposedly did nothing. And Carmen recalled seeing an article about this group of Connecticut-based paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And creepers, if you're not familiar with the Warrens, I would say that they are basically the most famous paranormal investigators. They definitely
Other than Zach Bagans and his
I was going to say,
team.
baby, they walked so Zach Bagans could run now. Let's be clear.
Is it Bagans or Bagans? I've never
think
been quite sure, so I always just go Bagans.
I said Bagans.
turn for
Bagels.
Bagans.
Zach, I think it's Zach Bagans.
Zach Bagans. Okay.
Zach Bagans, I believe. But yeah, I mean, he owes a lot of his ghost busting career to the Warrens,
Yeah,
I would
give it
say.
up, Zach Bagel.
Come on, Bagel.
Let's go, Bagel. What's
Come
up?
on, Bagel. Let's go, baby. That's how I'm going to level his ass when I meet him. I'm like, hi, Zach Bagel.
It's so to intentionally mispronounce someone's name. I'm a huge fan, Zach Bagel.
Zach Bagel. Oh my
Zach
God.
Bagel, I have watched so
You
much
have
of your
changed my
content,
life, Zach Bagel. Yeah, they've been involved. If you're not familiar with them, they have been involved with some of the most famous paranormal cases of all time, which is the Perron family. That's the story of The Conjuring,
Yeah.
the Amityville horror case, the Enfield poltergeist. And all of those were well before the Snedeker family incident. So they had quite a bit of like national appeal at this point. So Carmen apparently gave them a call, and supposedly Lorraine and Ed Warren were so captivated by what she had told them that they showed up at 9 a.m. the next morning. And this would have been, I believe, in July of 1988. So the family had been living there for a couple of years. And when Ed and Lorraine stepped into the house, they claimed that they knew instantly that there was a demonic and dark aura that filled the entire home. And apparently they started out the day by interviewing Carmen and Al separately. And I will say that I think having two people just even believe them at this point was such a comfort, because what I saw was that a lot of the neighbors had started to say like, oh my God, the Snedekers are like crackpots. Like we see them like apparently saw Carmen like flying out of the house and like running down the street at one point because she was like so scared and the thing was chasing her. Like they definitely had a reputation in this neighborhood. So having them there was a huge comfort. And not only did they believe them, but they said they needed to stay in the house for several weeks in order to fully expunge the demonic presence. So I do just have to laugh that like Al had apparently hated how full the house was at this point, and like he gets two more people in the house that are demonologists. So that did just kind of like crack me up as I was doing the research. But Lorraine convinces the Snedekers that the demonic presence in the house was a result of the old funeral home, which she determined had basically employed someone who was practicing necromancy in the home. So like I was saying, someone that was summoning spirits and talking to them while they worked there all those years ago. She also said it made perfect sense that the demon had initially latched itself onto Philip at first, because demons will always latch themselves to the most vulnerable person in the family. She also claimed that demons follow what she determined was her 5-step plan. First, I'm just sharing this as a word to the wise. This is Lorraine Warren's how to know you're dealing with the demon. She said, first, they encroach, then they infest, they oppress, they possess, and then unfortunately comes death. Now,
it sounds quite familiar to something we're all experiencing right now.
Yeah.
On a large scale.
Oh my God, exactly. Now, what I wanted to know throughout all of this that I didn't see any information on was like how Philip was doing. I was very curious about this. I couldn't find anything about like what the protocol was with him, still being under psychiatric care,
Right.
and had the demon like left him alone and latched itself only on to the others. But I did just want to share that with you and the Creepers. I was really curious about that. So if anybody does know anything about that, I'd love to know. I also just wanted to mention that the Warrens brought along a couple of assistant researchers, one of whom was their nephew, a guy named John, and he's been very, very vocal about what he saw. Supposedly, when he came into the home to help with the investigation, he saw a very clear apparition at the top of the Snedeker stairwell, and I think I have a picture also of him standing supposedly where he saw
Let
it.
me see.
But he said... And the reason I wanted to bring up John is that when I said like he's their nephew, I was like, okay, well, he's inherently biased. Like he works for the Warrens, that's family. But when I watch interviews of him, he was very, level-headed as you can be, I guess. But he was very much like, when I came into the home, I didn't really think anything of it. Like he kind of had our point of view, saying that this is a funeral home. Everybody in there was already dead. Like, what are we really going to find? But he said he had this very specific incident where he smelled something just super foul smelling. And that was his initial tip off to go and search around the house. And when he did, he heard the sound of wings. And when he looked up at the top of the stairs, he saw wings. He saw this like winged being that he said was like a archangel demon looking thing. And I just wanted to call that out because he did not strike me as the type, as he was recounting the story, to kind of, it just seemed like a very dramatic portrayal of a demon. And I did not expect for him to say that. So just calling that out if we want to like add to some of the...
It's very specific too. I don't think I would have, I think I would have thought of like turning around a corner when you're doing a ghost investigation or a paranormal investigation and hearing or seeing something with wings. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of is like a archangel like type. But I kind of called it out too, because I remembered the youngest son saying that he had seen a quote, like figure flying around the room. So there was like some sort of tie there.
Back.
Yeah. But obviously for me, baby, if I hear wings fluttering, I'm out no matter what. That would scare the crap out of me.
I was going to say, we're in like 1988, what you're talking about right now. And I'm like, they started renting in 1986. Why did they renew the lease? It's like, girl, what?
Girl, get out. I know.
I mean, it seems like it's pretty bad. It seems like they're not coexisting well with the spirits. So
yeah.
And I know there's an issue of convenience and they have a child who's sick, but why did you renew the lease?
Baby. I guess really her biggest thing was she was saying at that point, she thought it was just going to follow them wherever they went. So she felt like it didn't really matter if they moved out of the house because she gets, believe me,
I'm like, well,
grilled
no, till you
about
try.
it.
Fresh start.
I know. Baby, at least try.
Hold on, there's a fuzzy on my mic.
Oh, get that fuzzy off.
I got it. Oh,
Get that little winged being off of there.
don't stop.
It's oppressing
there
you.
are crows around here. I'm
It
already
might possess
paranoid.
you. Oh God. Oh my God. But with the Warrens, obviously came this like huge media firestorm, which
Mhm.
Carmen has now said was a result of her actually wanting to go public with what they were experiencing in order to put pressure on the church to help them out, which I guess isn't a bad plan because the church is probably going to be pretty pissed. One of their members goes super public with all of this and they're going to want to shut it down quickly. But I don't think that she and the Warrens had really considered the ramifications for their kids and their nieces because apparently all of them dealt with like a ton of bullying and taunting in school, which I would assume so. Yes, like that would come with all of this. But I just want to get your thoughts now on Carmen and if you feel like at this point, maybe are you feeling more like she's doing this for financial gain? Or is this really just a cry for help, like to get the church involved in this manner? Like, if you didn't help me out the first time, let's blow this thing up and then you'll come and help me. I thought that logic was kind of odd, but
You hear that sockle flying in the background?
I do. It's the wing being.
That's my son to bulldoze over this. I don't know. I think I would have to get a better sense for her personality, to be honest, because a lot of what you're saying makes sense. Like, yes, you could go public. You could put public pressure on the church if that's your last resort. If you truly believe you cannot leave this space, it will follow you. And maybe that was something she drummed up herself. Maybe it was something Ed and Lorraine Warren fed her. I'm not really sure, but I would have to know if people saw her as an eccentric person well before this. And for me, that could inform how much of the story she's concocting herself and driving herself.
Damn, I really wish I had brought you some clips of them on these talk shows because I feel like
have you seen her talk? Do you get a sense for
I
her?
have. Yeah. It's interesting because she on the talk shows they go on, it's very obvious that she's in a position now where, first of all, when she gets brought on, it's basically like a Maury situation where she's being grilled by the audience. Like they're like, and half of the audience is very supportive and curious about what they went through. And then the other half of the audience is like, why didn't you move out? And like grilling her. And
I'm like, what's with the lease renewal?
Exactly. Well,
deal
no,
couldn't
I
have
mean,
been that
I would
great.
be the same way. I would be the same way. I did feel at first I felt a lot of compassion for her because like, especially there's a moment where the niece starts talking. And now in hindsight, I'm like, okay, well, if it's true that they knew at that point that Philip was behind the assaults, then that would explain it for me. But the niece is like, she can barely talk. Like she keeps trying to talk and Carmen is like holding her hand. She's like, it's okay. It's okay. Like the family clearly went through something extremely traumatic, whether or not it was a giant hallucination or not. It was horrific. And I could tell there was pain reliving it in that moment. But I think also Ed and Lorraine Warren then get brought out. And it's like, I feel like there were some conversations there where it's like, all right, once they come out, let's really dial this puppy up. And I think Carmen's personality kind of like adjusts to them being there all of a sudden. I mean, the segment's like 45 minutes. I need to send it to you because I cannot believe some of the things.
Seems stable when she's talking.
She seems stable. Yeah. She seems stable to me. There's also a documentary that I watched of her much later in life. And actually in that one, she seems a little less stable to me. But she seems like overall like a normal, good person. I don't know. I think I also struggle with the fact that like she was a really good mom, like very caring. And of course, like took care of two kids that weren't even her own. That I do just kind of like, because no parent in their right mind really wants to create all this like unrest for a bunch of little kids, unless you're nuts. And she doesn't strike me as that type, but.
Yeah, if you catch a vibe for her and you catch like a sense that she is relatively normal and of sound mind, it's more compelling for me to believe that something may have happened. So
yeah,
I've been walking this line where I'm like, I don't know if it's shared delusion is maybe not the right term for this or phrase, but I'm thinking of like a mass hysteria where she is the driver, and that is traumatic for people, especially impressionable children or even teenagers who could start to believe that, if you're told repeatedly there is something in this house that's following us, that's hurting us, that's after us, you will not sleep. You will be paranoid around every corner. So that is a traumatic thing that you yourself might start to hallucinate and believe in.
Yeah.
But it's all from the source, which could be her. So I've been walking this line between, is that what's happening? Or was there something really going on here in this house in Southington?
God, I wish we could. That should be a premium episode, is that we live stream us watching that 45-minute talk show, because it is bonkers. They have them do like reenactments where they like get in the bed and like have to go through what they like said that they felt. It's so 80s and like weird. But
this was like 88 or 89 or something.
This was 88. Actually, you know what? I think the talk show was maybe like 2 years later that it aired
like
on
early
television.
90s or something.
Yeah, like early 90s. But I'll get into it later. Actually, I did want to like bring it up, but yeah, it gets even, there's even more that goes down in that. But I need to send that to you and have you get like more of a full scope on Carmen.
I got to see what she's like.
Yeah. So back to the church aspect of this. So according to another report I saw, the church, after all this like publicity comes out with the Warrens, actually do get involved. And apparently on September 6, 1988, a Roman Catholic priest and a deacon from the Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford, Connecticut, came to the home and performed a full-on exorcism, which was apparently successful and got rid of the demons. Now, this exorcism garnered even more press.
I'm like, how do they know that?
I know.
Like, how can they tell?
Well, I guess it's like they wake up one day and it feels like it's gone. Who knows? I included in the visuals the breakdown, the like article that was published about it later on.
Oh, let me check it.
I need to like blow that up and read exactly what it says, but apparently it was deemed successful. Shortly thereafter, though, the Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford came forward and they said, "We never sent out those 2 clergy members. We have no record of this exorcism being performed."
I literally had this thought in the back of my mind. I was like, why do I feel like those 2 priests are maybe like crackpots or
take
something?
that with a grain of salt.
Affiliated with the church.
But supposedly this was like a thing that happened with Ed and Lorraine Warren too in other incidents. I don't know if you remember that from like The Conjuring or Amityville.
Where like people don't cop to going out there and performing the exorcism.
Yeah. Where there's like this track record of them saying that they like hired some priest to come out and do this. And like, it might be like Joe Schmo, like their friend that they've like
some actor from
paid to be the priest. Yeah. And it's not real. So anyways, shortly after this exorcism, the family had enough money at this point, I guess, to get out of the house, and they ended up moving back to New York. And then they did sort of this like press junket. So I do recommend, creepers, that you check them out. The one that I was just talking about specifically was from this show called the Sally Jesse Raphael Show, which I had never heard of before. But apparently Sally Jesse Raphael was like huge talk show host in the early 90s. And this famous segment was like this 45-minute interview. Like I said, they did like a live Q&A with the audience, which was sort of split between believers and skeptics. The Warrens eventually came out to testify that what they saw was real. And then the craziest part of all of it is that they had the people that were now living in the home come out and basically denounce all of the Snedeker's claims. And it basically, baby, turns into like a Real Housewives reunion once the new family comes out, and they are just like arguing back and forth with each other about what could have been going down. They also bring out like previous neighbors, one of which was like a younger kid, and this was actually really sad. He said that like, everybody in the neighborhood knew that like Philip was taking drugs at the time, and actually Carmen like cops to that on live television. She's like, you know what, we did know that like Philip had somehow found his way into like taking drugs, and you're right about that. Like it basically goes way downhill very quickly once these like former neighbors, now the new tenants, come out. They also kind of like make claims that this all went down because the Snedekers were late on rent payments and the landlord told them that later on. Who knows? You can go watch that segment for yourself and kind of make your own assessment, because I think a lot of it is like heightened for television.
Rent payments. looming eviction.
I know.
That sounds like all the more reason to get the hell out of the demon house.
Exactly. But I encourage you, if you are feeling like, okay, I don't know which way to lean, go watch that because it's very, I don't know. You could say that a lot of it is just like for television, and it's at a certain level, it's pretty.
It's like produced.
Yes. But it does add like a little bit more context if you're curious as to why they didn't move out. But to patch this all up, I want to just talk about where the Snedekers are now. So apparently their son Philip did go on to beat that cancer as a kid. And I think I have a picture of him on the last page. And he had a pretty normal life. He worked as a truck driver for a long time. He was a father to 4 children until he ended up tragically passing away in 2012 at the age of 38 when his cancer returned, which was really sad. And Carmen and Al, I believe, got divorced in the mid-90s after everything kind of died down about this. And Carmen, who I now have seen, her name is Carmen Reed, so maybe she got remarried, but she has become a spiritual advisor. And she apparently does not talk to Ed and Lorraine Warren anymore, though. They had a falling out after the Warrens wrote a book called A Dark Place, which came out in the 90s that was based off of this whole thing, and apparently really misquotes Carmen and Al throughout the entirety of it. And I think they were told...
so they stopped talking back in the 90s.
Yes. So it was like shortly after they did that.
Ed and Lorraine Warren are dead.
Oh, yeah. In the 90s. Not now.
You were like, they don't talk anymore. And I was like, I bet they don't.
Well, Carmen's also like pushing it. She's up there too. Yeah, sorry. In the 90s, when the book came out, they no longer were like in cahoots. But I think this is another interesting thing that I think that Carmen was kind of sold when she had, when they had pitched the idea of this book, A Dark Place, that they were going to be painted in a certain light, and then came out later on that there was like a lot of stuff that was sensationalized about like what Carmen had said and gone through in the house.
They tried to exacerbate the experiences that the Snedeker family had gone through.
Yes. Yeah. And so they no longer were on speaking terms. But I believe that Carmen now lives in Tennessee. She really enjoys her life of solitude out there. And really, the only recent memory of this story really resurfacing was the 2009 movie, A Haunting in Connecticut, which I definitely need to go and watch. Although I did look up the Rotten Tomatoes score because I was like, should I watch this before I like do the case? Which I will go back and watch because I've seen little bits and pieces. It does have a 17% score, baby. So I don't know how much I'm going to go watch it, but
I mean, it was 2009, so I was in high school, so I don't remember it being particularly great, but it was like any other like haunting movie, I think.
I feel like it was one of those great movies that like everybody went and saw in the theaters and talked about, like, because the actual popcorn
I definitely did see it in the theater.
Everybody on the like popcorn score was like, oh my God, this was such a fun movie to like go see when I was a teenager. Like, so that's a lot higher. But yeah, I thought it's a really fascinating story in and of itself, just like the idea of it being an old funeral home and some of the stuff that they found. But I wanted to bring, something a little bit more paranormal, a different flavor.
Yeah, it's a little spooky. Do you know if the house is still there to this day?
It is. Yeah, it is. Because I think I saw an article about the woman that was living in there when A Haunting in Connecticut came out. Because apparently that really like got everybody excited again. She felt
about it.
Oh, she felt a certain way. She was like, it's like the article is so funny. It said something like I need basically get the hell off my lawn is what the article said. It was like, this is ridiculous. Nothing has happened in this house.
Could you imagine what a nightmare? Not only, you move into a new house. You're like a first time homeowner. Like you pinched every penny.
Yeah.
You got the mortgage. You're like, wow, thank God. Spend all this money renovating. It's great. It's an old colonial. And then all of a sudden you find out, oh, there's some dark history to this place. Okay, not ideal, but I can live with it. And then Warner Brothers comes out with a movie all about how haunted your house is. It makes its waves through podcasts and people just start coming to leave you like a tourist attraction. That would be a nightmare. A nightmare.
Especially if you're some like, I mean, in my head, as I was reading this, it was like some like older woman that was like having her like coastal grandmother moment where she's like, finally in my old colonial home. And then this happens.
What time is it?
I was going to say, did that come out of my mouth?
It did.
Oh my
1:12.
God.
I literally thought, I was like, Sue has to stop doing that.
I know. I'm like, this
Like, please
shoot
stop.
happens. I know. Sorry.
Ooh, that is
Sometimes it
spooky.
just
You know what?
happens.
I think I remembered something halfway through you telling me it. The depiction of, I think it was Philip and what was the other boy's name in the basement? There were two boys who were in the
Bradley.
basement. Bradley. When they were in the basement, I definitely saw this dramatized on like Discovery Channel, like Hauntings Edition or like Halloween Edition. I saw a dramatization of this I was watching when I was a kid on my like bedroom TV really, really late at night. I was scaring the hell out of myself. My bedroom when I was like really young growing up was actually like a dining room. So I didn't have like a door.
Yeah.
So I had a clear shot into like the kitchen, and the kitchen like could show to like the back patio area, like the little like deck area. While I was watching this, I like turned over towards the kitchen window and the motion light went on right when they said the light flickering thing that Philip was experiencing. And it scared the absolute hell out of me.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
petrified. It like came flooding back to me while you were talking about this.
And then you were like, wait, I actually removed all of the light bulbs yesterday. How did that happen?
I was like, I convinced myself, I'm like, that's probably a coyote. A coyote.
It's a coyote.
It's definitely a coyote.
A coyote, baby. But
You know, very spooky.
very spooky. And what I will say is if I come to your hometown in Connecticut, we're going there because it's close
To
by.
Southington?
Yeah, we're going.
I wonder how far of a drive that is because I definitely never
25
been.
minutes. I looked it up.
Is it?
Yeah.
I
I was
gotta
like,
see on a
just in the
map like
event.
which part of the state it's in because it's like not coming up in my brain. Let's see. Southington.
Okay, I kept saying
That's fine.
Southington. Southington probably makes
It's
more sense.
Southington.
Southington.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I mean it's still it's pretty central actually. Still South Central.
Which one?
South Central.
Which of the like cases that the Warrens have touched is spookiest to you? Conjuring, Amityville, Enfield Poltergeist, Snedeker House.
I think it's Enfield if I'm remembering it correctly. Is that the one that I covered? There was one that was a poltergeist that there were so many witnesses between like reporters, paranormal investigators, police officers. Like there was a whole group of police officers who said they saw a fridge lift off the ground and rotate. And I think the Warrens came in for like a split second. They were not like investigators
Camped
on
out.
that.
Yeah.
They like showed up when like the press was hitting, which is also like, of course, the Warrens just like show up in a goddamn bodice. Like,
I was going to say, if anybody's casting an Ed and Lorraine Warren film, you got your two right here.
I
You
want
got
to
the
play.
Warrens.
I want to play Lorraine. is
I
the
want to play
thing.
Ed. I want to play Ed.
Oh my god!
Let's do
Also,
it.
how sexy they made them in The Conjuring, like between what's his name, Patrick Wilson. And Vera. They're
Yes.
so hot.
Yep.
They're so hot.
And then you look at, no slight to them, but like Ed was not Patrick Wilson. That's all
It
I'm going to
was
say.
certainly not Patrick
was
Wilson.
not
Like
Patrick
truly,
Wilson, baby.
Ed Warren made out like a bandit with how he was portrayed and like
I know.
immortalized in film. It's crazy. Patrick Wilson.
Patrick Wilson.
Wilson.
Raoul from Phantom.
Stop. I'm gonna give
Oh,
myself
no.
palpitations.
Oh
No,
my
that was
God.
spooky.
Well, baby,
Spooky.
thanks for going on the little paranormal ride with me. I was happy to
Thank
do a different
you.
flavor for me.
I know. Every time we do a paranormal case, there's always at some point in the case, I will start to tear up and I'll just get like a little freaked
Spooked.
out. Yeah, I'll
Good.
get spooked.
That's the goal. Always. Well, Creepers, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. We'll be back next Friday. I got another good case for next Friday. I think it's going to
Do
be,
you?
yeah, it's going to be like unsolved. Back on our BS.
Okay. I'm stoked for it. I can't wait.
But until then, we're just going to say goodbye.
And good luck.
Bye, Creepers.
Bye, guys. We'll see you next week.